Lon Chaney Sr. is recognized as one of the greatest silent film actors of all time. However, his son, Lon Chaney Jr., has a similar legacy. And while The Wolfman is not the first werewolf movie ever made, that would be Werewolves of London, ironically enough also from Universal Pictures, The Wolfman is more than likely the most famous werewolf movie ever made. I said last time that the 1940s were a decade where Universal essentially entered autopilot. That was largely the case. However, one lone exception was The Wolfman. Lon Chaney Sr. was an icon of horror, but, ironically enough, so was his son, Lon Chaney Jr., and he would become his own Man of a Thousand Faces, not only playing the Wolfman in a variety of movies, but also playing at one time The Mummy and Frankenstein's monster. But by far and away, Lon Chaney Jr. is remembered as playing the Wolfman. And the Wolfman tells the story of a man named Larry Talbot, who is bitten by a werewolf, played by Bela Lugosi in a minor role. And Talbot finds out the hard way that as soon as a full moon happens, he becomes a werewolf himself. The makeup on Chaney is one of the best parts of the movie. It still holds up tremendously well. And if you thought Boris Karloff getting into the makeup for The Mummy was brutal, you should hear the story about how Lon Chaney Jr. got into the makeup. As a matter of fact, I'll tell it to you. To basically make a long story very short, Chaney was basically forced to sit in a chair motionless for hours, as the scenes of him transforming were shot literally frame by frame. He would be left sit there while the crew went for lunch and using the bathroom. Chaney even theorized that special effects people drove tiny nails into his skin so that he would stay in that chair while the makeup was being applied and the shots were being filmed. I'm sorry, when nails are being driven into people's skin, that's when you've crossed the line. But despite the pain and suffering that Chaney did go through, he is the best part of this movie. Out of all the Universal monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein and etc., he feels the most cursed out of all of them. When he learns that he is in fact a werewolf, he feels like his life is over. And due to Chaney's incredible acting, you do feel like that as well. He essentially sells the fact that he is a werewolf now like you or I would when we would probably learn that we were a werewolf. But in a similar vein to Dracula and Frankenstein, there's a really great supporting cast in here as well. Claude Rains, who I think has been in roughly 6 billion movies throughout his career, was great as Lawrence Talbot Sr., and Bela Lugosi, while his role is brief, is still pretty great. And the Wolfman would serve as one of the last gasps of the golden era of the Universal Monster series. And like I said, it was all downhill from here.